Hello everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. We're back for another Fact Friday, and I'm in black again. We have a lot of great questions today, some mix related ones and a couple of business ones, which is always a nice balance. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't. Of course, you can go to producelikeapro.com, sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. And we have a new podcast, so please check out the podcast. Okay, let's get stuck in with the first question. You suggest getting 50% upfront before mixing. How have you determined the final price? Is it a quote based on an estimate of the amount of time you think it might take to complete? Yes, that is exactly what it is. Today, for instance, I was talking to an artist in Ireland, and we are talking about doing a certain amount of songs, and the certain amount of songs is dependent on how much it will cost. Maybe they'll do 3 songs, maybe they'll do 5. We have to determine what their budget is and what I can do for it. So if somebody comes to you and says, I've got $1,000 to spend, how much does that mean to you? Are you trying to get $200 a day? Are you trying to get $1,000 a day? Are you trying to get $100 a day? What are you going to charge? What do you think your time is worth? Now, for many of us who work in the music industry, 10 to 12-hour days is pretty standard. 15-hour days is quite often what we have to do. So if you're going to do one of those 10 or 12-hour days, and it's not always blasting music, but it's the other stuff, the nitty-gritty, like editing things a little tighter where they need to be. You know, doing automation. It's not always blasting in music. It can be a lot of detail work. It's not about listening for 10 or 12 hours and blowing your eardrums out. It's about spending a certain amount of time, working on the songs. Now, for that amount of time, what do you need to get paid? What is your time worth? Is it a $10 an hour, $50 an hour, $100 an hour? I mean, it really is something you have to determine. For some people, it can be quite a lot of money. For others, it can be fairly modest because, of course, you may have a modest lifestyle and live in an inexpensive place. But for somebody based in New York City, I'm sure they're not going to be working for $10 an hour, obviously. So find out what you want to make. If you want to make a couple of $100 a day for working your 10-hour day, $250 a day for your 10-hour day, if you want to start at that kind of price, then say, okay, how much are you going to get done in that period? So for me, if somebody's coming along and it's an acoustic guitar vocal demo and they want me to put drums and guitars and keys, vocals and mix it, I could probably do that if the arrangement is good in about a day. It's quite possible I could do it because we can go and play drums in the other room. I can plug in here, do some electrics, go and play some acoustics, put a bass line down. It's relatively quick. It's something I could probably do in a 10 to 15-hour day without feeling rushed, if the song is already an arrangement that we love. Otherwise, you're going to have to spend some time on pre-production. So maybe you'll add in half a day or 3 or 4 hours where you sit with the artist and go through the arrangement and get the tempo and the key and everything right. Maybe they go back and rehearse it and finish up the ideas and then come back. The point is like, those are the things you've got to decide. It might be that you're not a great multi-instrumentalist and you need a bit of extra time to perform all of those parts. And maybe you need half a day just to do guitars, which is absolutely fine. There's no pressure on this. So now suddenly you're in pre-production, extra time to do additional guitar parts. You're now on 2 full days for one song. You get where I'm going. You need to have a good understanding of your own abilities, your own limitations, where you excel, where you don't excel. Do you need another musician? Are you not a drummer? Do you need to hire a drummer to bring them in? Are you going to do drum programming? Do they want to do EDM stuff, but you don't do dance music stuff, but they want something organic? So maybe you have to hire somebody to do some programming. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you're a programmer, but you need to hire somebody to come in and play some guitars and play bass and play, all of that kind of good stuff. These are all of the things that as a producer, you have to take into account when you're budgeting. Sit there and work out what elements you need, what instruments you need, what instruments you play, somebody else would play, how much they're going to cost if they bring them in, and how long you think it's going to take. And if it's 1 or 2 or 3 days to do that song, budget it out at an hourly wage that feels good for you and take into account any additional expenses. And that could be $1,000 for a song because it might be 3 days of your life. Remember, it's not just you're charging. You're charging you, your studio, your electricity bill. There's a lot of things to take into account. Maybe you have an intern. Maybe you have somebody helping you. What are you going to do? Are you buying lunch for people? There's lots and lots of things to take into account. And we've all done it where we've all overextended ourselves and worked twice as many hours as we should for half as much money. So just get a pen and paper and just make some notes and see if you can basically come up with something that makes some sense to you. Maybe have a little bit of latitude in there in case it goes half a day over or a few hours extra recalls. Build in a little bit of extra fail-safe in there. Anyway, lots of things to check on that. I think this is probably a really, really good discussion point that I'll bring up in the Academy in particular. So for Academy members, let's do a business call on this because I think this will be a really, really good one to talk about. So marvelous question. When you're charging by the hour for a mixing project, how can you prove that you've worked X amount of hours so you can get paid properly? The reality is you need to come up with a price. You don't necessarily have to say it's an hourly. So my point is, if something, I don't know, maybe it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 songs. It doesn't matter how many songs it is, and you figure to yourself that that's going to be 40 hours of work and you want to charge $25 an hour, you're going to come to them and say, that is $2,000 that you owe me. You get paid $2,000 to work on somebody's album and mix every song on their album. Because probably you're going to be working 6 hours on a mix and then keep picking it up. So that's 6 hours time. It's about a week and a half's work if you're working decent, short enough amounts of time on the mix to make it great. So you charge them $2,000 to do that. Now, they don't really have to know the hourly. If they do want to know the hourly, then sure, break it down. But I don't believe that is really a discussion. If it's a discussion for hourly where they need to see it, it's usually because they're there. So if somebody arrives at your studio at 8 p.m. and works with you to 11 working on a tracks, you're charging 3 hours. And I know that sounds really, really obvious, but that's the way the business works. You say, hey, you booked a 3-hour session. They need to be on time. And if they go over, they need to pay extra. There's nothing worse, and it's happened to all of us, where an artist arrives 45 minutes late and then wants to work 45 minutes later. It's not like, and not want to pay for it. It's not like you can't really do anything else. Give and take, latitude, you have to understand. There are different situations, of course, that may cause that to be something that you would forgive. But ultimately, when you're charging an hourly, it's something you've worked out as a full price. Don't say to somebody, I will charge you hourly, then send you an invoice. Agree it in advance. Build yourself some latitude. It goes back to the first question. If you want $2,000 to mix that indie project, charge them $2,000. If you get it done quicker, great. If it takes you a few hours extra, so be it. If it gets to a point where they're leaning on you for like 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, 10 recalls, then go back to them at a point and go, look, I budgeted on 3 or 4 recalls, which is pretty typical. We're now on recall number 7. I'd like to charge you an extra $200 for my time of doing all these additional recalls. And if you're professional and they like what you've done, they'll pay you. It's really about having a good relationship and being open and honest at all times, and honestly sensing as early as possible when something might be a problem. I've let it go wrong many times. We all have, but try to learn from the experience. You treat the client how to treat you. If you make it seem that it's totally cool that they arrived an hour late to do that vocal overdub, if that was cool, if you are late yourself to a session, you are basically telling them that you don't respect their time or your own time. So you need to be really prompt and really organized, and then they will respect you. If you push and pull on either thing and you let things go with them and they let things go with you, before you know it, that invoice, they'll start looking at it and going, yeah, but you were late a few days, Trust me, be professional. And if it means that you have to start an hour later, start an hour later. If it means that for you, starting at 10 a.m. is smart because you wake up in the morning and you're a little groggy and you need 5 cups of coffee because you work till 2 o'clock in the morning, then do that. Know yourself, be honest. You know, in the music industry, we always work, all of us always work incredibly long hours. So cut yourself a break, be reliable, and be good to your word. And you will do well, and you'll be able to justify the amount that you charge, and you'll enjoy this process. So I hope you're enjoying this. Please hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And of course, you can go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list, get a bunch of free goodies. If a client only has enough funds to have you mix one track, but is unsure of which track you should actually get professionally mixed, can they send you multiple tracks and then you would pick one of those to mix? Or is this unrealistic based on your time commitments? I think what you're asking here is like the multi-tracks. That doesn't happen very often. If somebody has an album and they want a single to be chosen and mixed and they're not sure what it is, I would never have them send the multi-tracks. I understand your question, but the multi-tracks is the last resort if I'm not sure. I just say to them, send me the roughs of the 10 songs. And I always ask this question. This is a really, really good question. What is your favorite? Ask them. When an artist says to you, and this is not just in the choice of track, this is in the choice of plugins, in the choice of how something should sound, the DI, virtual amp they've used on that DI, say to them, what were you going for? What song do you like? What's the sound that you want? Because they might be holding back. Because if they look at you as being more professional than them, they are afraid to be honest with you. It's a big deal. When I get on the phone with an artist, I hope to all goodness that they feel that I am on the same level as them and I'm not talking down to them. There's nothing worse than making it sound like you're super pompous going, yeah, I wouldn't do that, That's not the way to talk to an artist. You need to be like, I listen to your songs, I love what you're doing, I get your vision, there's a couple of things I'd like to ask you about so I can understand how to make the music better. That's the way to treat every single artist. It doesn't matter if it's Aerosmith or Era Jones. Just treat them with respect. And then they will be able to open up to you and they'll actually tell you what they love. So why am I pushing that point? I'm pushing that point because you might spend an hour listening down to 10 songs, 40 minutes maybe, making notes and going, I don't know if I like that one. This is kind of a single, kind of a not. And then you end up with a lot of maybes. Maybe if they're lucky, one song jumps out at you. But more often than not, one song doesn't jump out at you. You have 2, 3, or 4 possible songs that you think could be incredible. That's when you go back to them and you say, if you haven't already, what is your favorite song? You know what? And if it corresponds with one of those 2, 3, or 4, you're off to a flying start. And you can ask them, what is your vision on this? And if they say, I want to be death metal, but they're obviously country, then you're going to have a big discussion. But you understand my point. You need the artist to back you. I have had it happen where I've been so passionate about working on one song, but the artist has not agreed with me, and it's become a little bit of a difficult situation. You do need to be really together on this if you're going to get the best results. You're always going to get the best results working with the artist because you're working for the artist, not working against the artist. So get in there, communicate with them. All you need is rough mixes. You don't need the multi-tracks. The only time you would need the multi-tracks is if, frankly, the rough mix was so bad, sounded so bad that you were concerned you might not be able to mix the song. It's happened to me once or twice in my whole career where I've listened to the rough and I'm like, I'm not sure whether the song is mixable because it's like really distorted or really very, very muddy and there's no clarity. Then I'll get the multi-tracks and look at it and go, these drums are unfixable. I need to re-record them. This guitar part's unrealistic. I had it happen to me a couple of years ago. We talked about it with a vocal that had a standing wave that was so bad that no matter what I did to it, the vocal was unusable. So we had the artist re-sing it. I needed the tracks to be able to tell because the vocal sounded so bad in the rough mix, I wasn't sure if it was a bad mix or a bad recording. That's the only time I would ask for multi-tracks. Otherwise, song choices can easily be done using rough mixes. Do you ever record with a click track or flashing light in the studio? definitely record with click tracks all the time. That's pretty normal. However, been talking to Michael Beinhorn, who's one of the greatest producers ever lived. Of course, resume speaks for itself. Dave Jordan, another absolutely amazing producer. Shelley Yakis, Jack Douglas, so many people we've been talking to recently, and they have all said that quite often they would start with a click track, like the Soundgarden record, start with a click track and then turn it off. And so it would be the groove that they were laying down with the tempo, and then the click track would get turned off and the song would speed up, slow down, whatever it was supposed to do to feel like a great, great song. The click was just there as a guide to get the tempo that the song should be at. But then the speeding up and slowing down was all about the live performance. When you go and see a band play live, unless it's, a band with tons and tons of backing tracks and DJs and EDM and elements and all this stuff, a classic, great rock band, they may just start off with a click track just for tempo. But the thing that I liked about your question, and the reason why I wanted to ask it, was the flashing light. That is something a couple of great drummers I have worked with do. They do start off with the click track and then the click track disappears, but then the light is flashing like this, like you see this little light going like that. And then it becomes something they play to as a guide, but they don't have that annoying ice pick into the side of their head, telling them when they're maybe flamming with it. So it's like dum, dum, flap, flap. And there's nothing more annoying than flamming away with the click track that's, like I said, an ice pick in the side of the head. So the visual cue means that they can know when to pull back a little bit if they feel like they're racing a little bit, or speed up. But it doesn't spoil the flow of the music. It allows it to breathe. So actually that's a pretty nice tool to use if you are not good or more importantly, don't want to work to the ice pick, then just use the flashing light. I do like that a lot, because unless you're going to be gridding this out of necessity because you've got all these program parts which are cut to the grid, you really should be allowing yourself the ability to have the song breathe in a way that all great music really does. Anyway, hope you're doing marvelously well. Thank you ever so much for those amazing questions. Please leave a bunch of comments and questions below. I love going through them and answering questions. If you've got more Feedback Friday questions, please leave them here. This has been really, really wonderful. It's been another great Frequently Asked Questions Friday. Have a marvelous time producing and mixing and recording and all kinds of fun stuff.